Welcome back, a-holes. I'm not really calling you an a-hole. That's just a reference to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. I love you. Please like and subscribe to tell me you understand the reference. Welcome back, MCU fans, to my spoiler-free review of Jame Gunn's final chapter in his MCU journey, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And to say that we hit many stumbles and many obstacles on the road to this film being made and being out is putting it mildly, whether we're talking about the actual script, the story, or everything behind the scenes. But nevertheless, still reeling from the loss of Gamora, Peter Quill must rally his team around him to defend the universe by protecting one of their own. A mission that, if not completed successfully, could quite possibly lead to the end of the Guardians of the Galaxy as we know them. And as a frame of reference, I grew up on Marvel Comics, be it the Avengers, X-Men, Spider-Man, including Guardians of the Galaxy. So when Jame Gunn first came into the MCU with that original Guardians movie, I was one of the very few people who already knew who they were despite being very niche characters, and I ended up not being one of the biggest fans of that film. I like it a lot, it's a good movie, but I also have always preferred Volume 2. I think it's a stronger film, it's a more emotional film, it has more compelling characters with actually rich layers to them. So I am certainly not a stranger to MCU hot takes, be it with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, Volume 2, and really most of Phase 4, but Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 will go down as something truly special, truly unique and individual to Jame Gunn's characteristics as a storyteller, and I think it's going to rightfully speak and ring true to a lot of people. I prefer to a lot of films that I already like in Phase 4, from Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, well, that's Phase 5, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, to name a few. This film really speaks to the specialness of these characters and how important it is to celebrate and highlight the individual voices of filmmakers such as Jame Gunn. And it feels particularly fitting for him to release a film that speaks so much to celebrate our humanity and how imperfect it is, because in our imperfections, us being together is what makes us better, is what makes us, this group of Guardians, perfect in a time where it's been discussed that films could be written by AI, art could be made by AI, and you have a villain that is so similar to AI, so emotionless, so detached, so completely devoid of anything unique to himself and anything human to define him. And here's this movie, right on the right time. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but there's something really spectacular in this film that spoke to me in that regard. So going into this film, I was hoping it would be more along the lines of Volume 2. And thankfully, it is. It is distinct from Volume 2, where Volume 2 is a lot about the hurt these characters feel and how that hurt, how those traumas, how those flaws inherent to their individual characters may clash and break them apart as a group. So there's a lot of inherent mean-spiritedness in that film, which I loved. Volume 3 has all the heart that encompasses and perfectly captures the journeys of these characters from Volume 1 to Volume 2 and now to Volume 3. Because in classic Jame Gunn fashion, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 aspires for sweeping emotion, riotous laughter, and exhilarating action, delivering them all in spades. The best elements this film has going for it is its emotion and how it's guiding the narrative and its characters. All of them have rich layers to them. All of them have their moment in the spotlight. And while you clearly have stars, you have protagonists and supporting characters, there is enough there for each of them to have these arcs that feel fulfilling, but most importantly, feel earned. It doesn't feel like a character gets to pay lip service to the idea of an arc, to the idea of a character journey, James Gunn is doing the work with his writing, whether he's paying off the individual journeys of certain characters or the collective journeys of the Guardians as we know them, having been on this journey with them for 3 films and then their appearances in the other Avengers movies, Love and Thunder, and all that. It's a movie that carries the weight of their journeys so far. It's a film that understands their brokenness and explores their brokenness further from Volume 2. Volume 2 was a lot about exposing those vulnerabilities. It was a lot about actually showing these characters have depth to them and beginning their process of healing. Volume 3 is about how healing is hard. Healing is not fixing something or someone, it's something you strive for and you keep working at it, but it doesn't define you. And that's what really captured my heart in this film. That's what really pulled on those emotional strings because James Gunn creates a film that is a lot about imperfections, but about how those imperfections, the imperfections that make us individually who we are, that make these guardians individually who they are actually beautiful and actually the reason they were brought together and why they work together in the first place. And there's something really compelling and relatable, grounded about that emotional core of the film. Which leads us to characters in the film, beginning with Rocket Raccoon. And honestly, everything involving Rocket is fantastic. He truly is the heart of the movie, really of the entire trilogy. It's as if James Gunn's very soul is embodied in a character that not only drives the story forward, but motivates the other characters around him, being his friends, our protagonists, and even our villain, earning every ounce of emotion that it gets from you. Because, yes, this is a rip roaring space opera with a ton of incredible action, including an amazing one shot in a hallway that is so distinctively James Gunn, and it's so magnificent to see. But this is a very intimate story. And it's very dark. In terms of tonal pivots, you have the trademark James Gunn dark, cynic, raunchy humor in what is perhaps his most sentimental film, but also definitely his darkest film. There should be a trigger warning for animal cruelty in this film because it goes to lengths I did not expect for a PG-13 movie, for a James Gunn movie, for a Disney movie, or an MCU movie. And it makes things hard to watch. And it pulls on those emotional strings earnestly. It makes Rocket's journey very effective and all the more compelling because we finally learn about this dark past that for so long he's held back, not just from us, the audience, but from the people closest to him. And we understand why. We understand how this trauma has held him back so much. And it also works to make our villain, the High Evolutionary, feel so sinister and intimidating. And this is not one of those villains that is great because they're sympathetic. It's one of those villains that works because they are pure evil, because they feel unstoppable and they truly believe in their goals. Their motivations are unshakable. And that relationship, that dynamic, is what makes this story work in its emotional side. When it comes to the rest of the characters, you can call some of them protagonists as well, but they're clearly a level below Rocket. Starting with Peter Quill, Gamora, and Nebula. These three make a very interesting trio throughout the film because you have Nebula, my favorite Guardian, who began her journey of healing at the end of Volume 2 and now has actually found a family that cares for her. And despite her brokenness, despite her trauma, she has finally begun to accept that she is more than what her father made her. And I love how James Gunn treats this in a complex way where she began her healing, but it's not an easy fix. It doesn't happen like that. So it's a process and there's never an end to it. We keep working at it and you see her through this film being her true self while learning along the way in compelling ways, and now having her sister back, but a different version. A version that is so much like the Nebula that we once knew, and so now it feels like they changed places in terms of their team dynamic within the Guardians of the Galaxy. And then you have the chemistry between Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana, who continues to be sparks off the screen. And it's such a different way of interacting that we had with the previous Gamora and Peter Quill, as you have this dude trying to get the girl, but focusing on trying to help Rocket and being so devoted to helping his friend. There are certain things with Peter Quill that I wish they would explore more, which we'll get to in my issues with the film, and Gamora as well, but I feel these three are our protagonists just below Rocket. And then you have Groot, you have Drax, you have Mantis. Those latter two, this pair is just wholesome, and it's a pairing we should cherish because they're adorable together. I love the banter between Drax and Mantis, and like everything else that I've been talking about, it feels like a natural progression of what we had in Volume 2, where Drax was just mean and, and so verbally vicious to Mantis because he just didn't know her, he didn't care. Now you have Mantis developing this edge where she fights back, she talks back to Drax, she insults him back. So there's just something really fun about that. And then you have Groot. He just works because he's cute. He's the dog of the group, even though we now have an actual dog in Cosmo, and I really love Cosmo in this film. I love Cosmo's relationship with Kraglin. Groot is awesome. We finally got out of Baby Groot, finally got out of Teenage Groot. Now we have Swole Groot. And when it comes to Swole Groot, James Gunn, there's so much inventive stuff with him, particularly in the action set pieces. This is 100% the best Guardians of the Galaxy film when it comes solely to the action. I talked about the one shot, but there are so many great set pieces in this film, whether we're talking about gigantic space battles, whether we're talking about one-on-one fights. The film opens with an excellent fight sequence in nowhere, and you always have Groot having a moment in the spotlight in those action set pieces, and it's fantastic. When it comes to the High Evolutionary, I don't think he's quite a great villain. There were moments in the film, throughout the film, where I found myself fearful of this character. I found myself wanting him to die a very painful, a very slow death. And as you see the film, you'll understand why as we dive again into Rocket's psyche and understand that relationship, understand so much of the abuse that Rocket went through because of this man. But at the same time, there was a part of me that kept asking, but why this goal? What is behind that? Not necessarily that I want to make him sympathetic. There was just nothing that could ever make this character sympathetic, but there was just something missing to take it to that extra level. That said, Chuck Woody does a fantastic job playing this character. If the intent with this character is just making him this unstoppable menace that truly believes in this mission he set himself out to accomplish, this is a menacing villain that poses a credible threat to the Guardians and manages to make his presence felt even if he's not on screen. And he does a lot of things to make him hateful, and it works. It's very effective. Finally, before we dive into themes, visuals, music, of course, and issues of the film, let's talk about Will Poulter's Adam Warlock, who comes into this film crashing down on the Guardians. That's not a spoiler. Those are the first 5 minutes in the film. I really like Will Poulter in this role. I really like what they do in the characterization of Adam Warlock, where he was just bored. He doesn't understand the world. He doesn't understand how to socialize. He doesn't understand how to interact with other living beings. He is very much created to be a weapon, a tool for someone to use. There's a lot of interesting ideas that come with that. There's a lot of good humor that comes with that. But I wasn't a big fan, or the biggest fan, of what they did with this character, of how they handled this character within this film. There's certainly a lot of potential for him, but the film already feels busy enough without him. It doesn't feel already too busy without him, but it feels complete. It feels like it's telling its story without him, where he comes in to cause some havoc, he gets out. He comes in, lands a little bit of urgency on top of whatever scene is going on, and he gets out. And then he comes back again to cause a little bit more havoc and rinse and repeat. And so I just don't think this film handled his inclusion in the best way. Going into themes, this is the most profound Guardians of the Galaxy film so far. This is a heartfelt, sentimental, soulful journey about imperfect people, about people who are broken being united by their brokenness. And in that, it feels a lot closer to what Volume 2 was about, what James Gunn was doing in Volume 2, than whatever he did in Volume 1. It makes that film look better, and this film is reinforced by that film's existence. So I just feel those two come very close together. And it explores these characters' trauma in ways that if we hadn't gone on this journey, certain parts of this film that definitely are James Gunn's jokes have this extra level to them, have this extra layer where, okay, that is funny, but it also works to pay something off about these characters. It also works to add to our perspective on them and to the emotion that comes with their journey. There's a sense in this film of these characters being tired. Not necessarily physically tired or not just physically tired, but tired of putting on this facade towards other people, towards the exterior world. And it's something that reflects our villain, where his entire being is a facade, where at one point, this guy, the High Evolutionary, he became his goal. There's nothing about him. There's nothing about what he wants to do. There's nothing about what he's created so far that is him. His entire being is an idea, a concept, and he's a husk of a living person. He's a meat bag walking around without having any individuality. And the lack of humanity in this villain is what makes the individual humanity, those imperfections in each Guardian, so powerful to see because it's human. This is James Gunn's plea for empathy, for second chances, and to accept the imperfections in one another. And there's just something profoundly beautiful about that I did not expect James Gunn to accomplish in the Guardians of the Galaxy film, even if I saw a lot of those elements in Volume 2. From visuals, this is one of the most colorful films in the MCU. It's so wacky and weird and fantastical, where they go into this kind of office building that is guarded by people in literal meat suits, and the ship itself is made of living organs. The High Evolutionary's warship, nowhere, everything about this film is so wacky, it's so James Gunny, and it's so weird. I love when the MCU dives into this side of itself. And when it comes to the music, obviously lots of great music. Personally, and do not kill me, this is my least favorite soundtrack in all of the Guardians of the Galaxy film. I just like the songs, but none of them ever felt like, ah, yes, this is the song for this moment. It's very James Gunny, the choices of songs, but to me, it's just music that doesn't speak to me as strongly as the previous two volumes did. Last point of discussion before I dive into my issues with the film, there are two post-credit scenes which I will explain and talk about in an upcoming spoilery video on Friday. One is in the middle, one is at the very end. None of them are super massive, they're still very Guardians focused, and there's a little tag at the end that you want to stay around for to learn. So with that said, my issues with this film are mainly its structure and how uneven it can feel. There are moments in this film where, as we dive into Rocket's psyche, sometimes Rocket is not even within the scene. And sometimes you'll be seeing Rocket, and suddenly we're in a flashback. And we learn, okay, Rocket is remembering this. Rocket is thinking about this. This is lingering on his mind. And we're made to understand this has always lingered on his mind. He has just held back. But now he's vulnerable, and that's how he can get in. But other times, as we dive into flashbacks, Rocket is not even in the scene. Rocket is not even being mentioned in a scene. And so it felt like an easy way out to go into this narrative device to keep the story going. That just felt weird. Like I said, the music isn't necessarily the most to my taste compared to the other two volumes, but I can mostly look past that. Adam Warlock, again, not the best. And finally, Gamora. Like I said at the beginning, this is a spoiler-free review, so I will be very careful in how I use my words, but I was unsatisfied with the Gamora resolution in this film. And that brings me to a wider issue where if we're seeing this as a film, it has a lot of really good things going for it when it comes to the characters, when it comes to the emotion. But looking at Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 as the concluding chapter of a trilogy, as the climax to the journey of these characters to this formation of Guardians, there is something anticlimactic about it. Particularly in Gamora, I could even say a little bit of Peter Quill. There's something about Peter Quill's journey that James Gunn takes just a bit too far than I would have liked, but that is honestly a nitpick. My biggest issue is with Gamora. And in general, if we're looking at it as a climax, there's something about it that just doesn't quite reach those ultimate heights. And I stand by all my positives, but my biggest issue is that this film is being built, it's being constructed, its inherent design in the story it's telling, it's a concluding chapter. We'll never see this formation of Guardians again, and there was just something missing when it comes with that. That left me wanting more, in terms of a story, in terms of a proper resolution, and it left me wanting more to certain characters, some more than others. Much like Adam Warlock, her journey works much better on paper than it does in actual execution, in seeing what they do with her and her dynamics with other characters, her relationship with other characters, what she learns in this film as this brand new Gamora. I'll have to see if something really changes, if something clicks on my second watch, because after just this first watch, I'm not very satisfied with what was done with her, sadly. Nevertheless, James Gunn accomplishes something truly special. I love having been on this wild ride with these characters. I love having learned about them and learning that they can be vulnerable, learning of the individual humanity to each of them, and learning of those beautiful imperfections that make them who they are and made us relate and fall in love with them. And so as I dive into my final thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I talked about the previous two volumes in Guardians of the Galaxy. You can find those reviews right on this playlist right here where I review every single MCU movie. I wanted to give brand new reviews for those films, but unfortunately, I couldn't. But if you want to talk more MCU movies and TV, this is the place to be. Consider clicking that subscribe button and you won't miss any future conversation on your favorite movies and TV. James Gunn leaves the MCU in triumph. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is one emotional, celebratory ode to the beauty in our imperfections, how they bind us together to forge unbreakable bonds. A truly heartfelt farewell to the galaxy's most endearing misfits. I'm giving Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a B+. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to let me know your thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Let me know your thoughts on this trilogy and how it compares to other trilogies in the MCU. And remember, you might be a-holes, but you're my a-holes. Big shout out to my channel members for always supporting the channel. And I'll be back very soon with more videos, including a post-credit scene explained. So until the next one, love each other and love the movies.